Good afternoon. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session for Wednesday, May 29, 2024, 3:27 p.m. My name is Ty Mentzer, Chair of the Board. To my left, Vice Chair Commissioner Wayne Fournier, Commissioner Gary Edwards, and Commissioner Emily Klaus. Commissioner Carolina Mejia participating virtually, and Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell and Rob Gelder. County Manager Leonard Hernandez will be joining us in just a moment. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. This session was scheduled to start at 3 p.m. We ran a little late with our Squaxin Island joint meeting, so we're going to get going. We have till 4:30. First up on the agenda is Offutt Lake Management District discussion.
Thank you, Commissioners. Rob Gelder, Assistant County Manager. I just thought I'll jump in and a couple of questions just wanted to pop up. This briefing was an opportunity to kind of on a high level understand and provide commissioners with information about the process for forming lake management districts, and then also sort of what transpired in the creation of Offutt Lake Management District number 24. And this was really in response to some emails and information that the board has been receiving from residents around Offutt Lake. And then also the process for should a lake management district move forward with dissolution. This will cover on that lightly as well. And that is the point of the briefing today. So I'll just get started. Sorry, too fast. So basically, again, the three briefing topics that we'll cover will be LMD formation, Offutt Lake, and then potential dissolution based on RCW 3661-310. So Thurston County Lake Management Districts, it is a program that is staffed in partnership with environmental health and the steering committees that, and of course are governed by the board approved standard operating procedures. The county assumes the liability for approved activities, manages all the permits, and all of the activity under the LMDs is subject to county policies. And then of course the steering committee must comply with all applicable policies and laws, and that is Open Public Meetings Act for their meetings and public disclosure requests, and of course following the standard operating procedures. This is a really tiny slide, and I apologize for that. That's why I handed out a larger version. This is not meant to be a reading test today, but does give you sort of a general flow of the formation of a lake management district, starting from the idea around a lake and the residents there, from creating their petition, having that circulated and bringing that to the board and its subsequent decisions. This actually under Offutt Lake will kind of break out a little bit more of some of the specific steps. So Offutt Lake in its creation, in the next two slides kind of cover, because when a lake management district is being proposed, there are certain objectives that are identified and then shared with those individuals as you're collecting signatures, and really becomes the purpose for the formation of the LMD. And so just wanted to share what was part of the Offutt Lake petition, and that specifically was to maintain a healthy ecological balance for humans and wildlife. It was to employ best practice techniques to ensure that environmental safety and preservation, contracting with a consultant company to conduct the IVAMP, or the Integrated Aquatic Vegetation Management Plan development for the, also control nuisance level of aquatic vegetation, noxious weeds, reduce toxic algae blooms, and educate, and in many ways, probably more importantly, the education and information that is shared with Lake Management District members on a myriad of topics. So as part of the formation, there were some, the board actually takes the opportunity, the petition is created, is circulated, it comes before the board. You then consider that potentially passing a resolution of intention to form the LMD, that triggers going out for the vote. And so you set a public hearing, you hold the public hearing, and then you actually would take action as a board to authorize a vote for the potential formation to the affected property owners. That vote occurs, and then the board would adopt by ordinance establishing the LMD following the vote. And basically, I know this was one of those questions that came up last year for the board. Once there is an affirmative vote by the residents, is there any discretion really that the board has? And per RCW, it is more prescriptive that if it is, in fact, if the board can decide to put it out to a vote or not, but if once the vote comes back and it's in the affirmative then, or in the negative, but if in the affirmative, the board has to move forward with the creation and establishment of the LMD. And then next, it's really about refining the assessments that are assessed per each parcel, whether they're lake frontage, upland, et cetera. And then you create and establish those roles that ultimately go to the county treasurer for collection. So just a sample ballot. It's really kind of very prescriptive per RCW. Should it be created? Yes or no? And what's nuanced there is that weights are not a simple yes or no. Everything is weighted based on the assessment, the cost of the assessment that someone will actually pay. So this is what's kind of interesting in the formation of LMDs thus far in Thurston County, is that there's a difference really in the raw vote and the weighted vote. So in this case, for Offit Lake, the lakefront parcels were charged a $750 annual rate, and it's basically $1, one vote. That's how you get the weighted basis. And sort of upland parcels, $70. A simple majority was determined based on the weighted vote, and you can see down below, the raw votes were 64. It was very close, but 64 votes for, 68 against, but it's that weighted vote where you had more parcels that were on lake frontage, et cetera, that surpassed the negative vote. So it's 29, and I apologize, it's not meant to be a decimal point there. That's actually 29,432 to 23,732 weighted votes. So it passed, and therefore the LMD was created. But
that weighted scheme, is that?
That's per RCW.
Okay, so that's state law that
That's
it
state
is
law.
done that way.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And so basically, once a LMD is created, the assessments are transferred to the treasurer, who does the collection. And per county policy, one of the first activities of a new LMD is to create that IVAM. And so that is one of those items that we went out for RFP, and we'll be coming back to the board on the 18th of June to potentially award a contract to do that IVAM for not only Offit, but also Patterson. So in terms of dissolution, that was sort of the other question. In many ways, dissolution per RCW 3661.310 is very similar to the formation, but it has a lot fewer steps. So basically, just the next couple of slides are taken verbatim per the RCW. But again, to simply put it, if there are an adequate number of signatures received via petition. So there's a couple of different paths. The board could actually put it out, make a decision to go out to a vote of the LMD property owners. If it was found by the board that the intent of the LMD in formation had been achieved. But that's why I included those original slides that said these were the various goals of the LMD. So that isn't necessarily a threshold that has been met. The other way is through petition. And so if you have enough property owners that would like to petition the board to send it out to a vote, you have to achieve 20% of the acreage of the parcels within the LMD boundaries. So again,
For to put it on the ballot?
to put it out to a vote.
20% of the acreage,
It's interesting.
which is totally different than the weighted vote for the formation.
To get the, well, no, there's still a percentage of property that says, here's a petition. So the petition doesn't really change that much. But you either satisfy the reason for formation, or if you have a sufficient number of petitions signed by at least 20% of the acreage within the district. So you're looking just land mass in this case.
That puts it on a ballot, and then the ballot has the same weighted vote.
It brings it to the board, and the board can consider to move forward with the potential vote. So it would then go back out to a vote. Basically, I tried to highlight in bold. So basically, if the question of dissolution of a district is submitted, so if there's an adequate number of petitions, and the board said yes, we agree, it goes out to a vote, then we would send out a similar ballot. It's yes, no, accepted. Instead of formation, it would be dissolution. And the weighted vote, again, would be the same based on the current assessment.
Does the board have the discretion, though? You're saying if we say yes?
So-
I mean, we get a petition with 20% acreage. Can we just say, oh, sorry, we're not interested in dissolution, thanks for your request? Or do we have to, if they've satisfied that, is there some mandate to put it on the ballot again?
Let's see, I just wanna, it's RCW, so it's, so one of the caveats is if there, for whatever reason, there had been some financial obligation of the LMD, if some work was bonded, there was an active contract, et cetera, if there's something outstanding, in other words, that the LMD would be impaired, a lake or beach management district may be dissolved either by the legislative authority, the board, upon finding that the purpose of the district had been achieved or accomplished, or a vote of the property owners of the district, if proposed by that legislative, that 20%. So as I read it, if that 20% is achieved, that vote would trigger the vote to the LMD members.
So it's either the legislative body can choose to put it to a vote, or that petition can force us to put it to a vote.
To put it to a vote, correct.
But it takes 20%.
Of the acreage, yes.
Never reached 20%. We're at 14, is that right?
With that petition that we received?
With what has been received to date, but the activity, as I understand it, of circulation of the petition still is happening. So there is the
Potential for them to
potential.
get to 20.
Potentially, yes. So
When it goes to, sorry,
Oh, no, go ahead.
going to a ballot, is that something that the auditor's office handles, or is that something that is administrative?
it's administrative. Previously had been done by Public Works. They would do
It doesn't
the-
cost much.
No,
Well, Mr.
it's
Trowbridge sued us and it cost money.
Well, this isn't his lake.
I know, but I'm just saying. It costs
So
money.
basically, it's an administrative function, not of the auditor's office. It would be either through the commissioner's office or through environmental health as the staff or the office that are currently supporting the LMDs. But we would craft a ballot and it would get mailed to each of the participating property owners within that district. Again, it would be weighted based on their assessment. And then that would be, they would have basically, each ballot must be returned to the county legislative authority, to the Board of County Commissioners, no later than 5 p.m. on a date specified when the ballot goes out, and no more than 30 days after the ballot are mailed. So then you get your up or down vote. If following the tabulation of the valid ballots, simple majority of votes cast in favor of dissolving the district the district must be dissolved. And again, that simple majority is based on weighted votes. And the county, although not separately responsible for satisfying the financial obligations of a dissolved district, has full authority to continue imposing the special assessments, rates, or charges for a dissolved district until all financial obligations of the district incurred prior to its dissolution have been extinguished or retired. So at this point in time, there's no bonding, there's aren't major contracts. The only
LMD's existed for like 2 months, right?
Yeah, 5. And there have been some assessments that have been collected, but the first really financial obligation is the IVAM creation.
That top block there, number 3, a simple majority of the votes cast.
Simple majority, but it's weighted votes. So it, again, if it's back, it's all weighted. It is a confusing part. They should have, I think, inserted a couple extra words in RCW to say weighted votes.
The other thing that I don't really get, two things. One is, and I'm not saying that the office did anything wrong, but it seems like you could bulletproof it against commissioners putting it on for dissolution by just putting in things that will never be over. You know what I mean? Like, in order to, so that somebody couldn't say you finished the project, you just say, I want to preserve ecological balance. That's what they said, right? Preserving ecological balance for the future. It's like, well, then you could never say they've accomplished the project because it's stated in a form that makes it in perpetuity. The second thing that seems odd is that, that doesn't, if there's no discretion, it seems like you could have a group that filed a petition every year. And like if they've got their hardcore 20% acreage, and they lose, now they cobble up, then they can say like 6 months later, well, things have changed, they're engaging in activities that are worse or whatever. Here's what we want another, we have to just keep going at this over and over, election after election after election, just because the same 20% are dissatisfied? That seems to be a flaw in this whole scheme.
It would seem to be right for that type of activity, the way RCW is currently written. Hopefully, I mean, I've never heard of that really.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they would peter out, but it seems like the board should have that latitude to go, nope, you know what? Because I always defer to putting something on the ballot if they followed a process, but that would be a way where I would say, well, no, you've just done this, like, you just had your second bite at the apple, and we're not doing this again.
Well, and hopefully, and with most, I think LMDs, that after you had an opportunity to get up and running and your program is actually active and you've done your IVAMP and you know your base level and you've established a work plan and you're starting to do something, it's all, I think, in many ways about momentum. And that's probably a personal opinion of that. It's so hard at the beginning when you haven't had the opportunity to show the worth of the organization. And so I actually, as part of the packet, handed out just some of the materials. Part of what the board had heard from the petitioners basically was about sort of inclusivity. In this packet just really demonstrates the welcome packet that the LMD does share with residents. Also their governance structure, their charter, for lack of better terms, which kind of addresses sort of their operations. And then, of course, their newsletter and application for, they would love volunteers, and the more volunteers, the better. So they do have that plug out to the community.
So if they do end up getting a ballot to go out, choosing if it's dissolved, there are costs to that, and like having a public works work on this, are those costs then deferred to the LMD and a part of their assessments to recover the work that the county would be doing? I mean, I would feel one way about it if this had been around for 6 years and had been defunct, but this was just propped up. It was voted on locally to give them local control, and it's not even 5 months later and they want to or there are people that want to talk about dissolving it, and I mean, it's a little, it seems a little soon, but they have the right, but they should also have to cover the costs, I would think.
That's a great question, Commissioner. We'd have to, I know in the formation, and I was not here for that, but there was a requirement for a bond. And so there was a process of actually raising the money to cover that. In this case, there are assessments there that have been collected that could be utilized to cover the costs. And per the way after we moved funds from Public Works to Environmental Health, we also implemented an administrative fee that could also be utilized for covering the costs of said election to go out to the residents. So there are ways of covering those costs. But I'll channel Robin on some level, and it gets back to, one fund cannot benefit another. So it would have to come from the LMD funds to cover the cost of this, as opposed to being funded by
Or the general fund.
or the general fund.
So now that we know everything about LMDs, what's the goal here at the end of this meeting?
The goal here really was 3 points. One, because we have two newer commissioners who weren't here during the formation, was to be able to illustrate, and I apologize if I didn't get it really
I think you did
dialed
good.
in with the vision exam here on the flow chart, but here's just the high level of how an LMD comes to be. The uniqueness of Offutt Lake in that the raw vote and the weighted vote were different, and that's a nuance here that I think the board just needs to be aware of. And the process for dissolution, which is less onerous than the formation thereof.
But right now, we have some folks claiming that they're saying we should put it to a vote because the goals of the LMD have been met, which I don't agree with. So setting that aside, then they've got to get their 20% acreage, and they're working on it, but they don't have it.
Correct.
And if they come in with that, then we have no choice but to put it back to a vote for dissolution.
Correct.
Okay, so there's really nothing for me to decide here today.
Not today. This is not for board decision today. This
And
is just
what's the time frame? Do they have 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 2 years?
There's nothing prescribed by state
Whenever they
statute.
want.
That's the, Chair, that's the research that the commission asked us to go back and look at, is with the petition, with the letter.
Yeah, how do you vet the petition?
Assuming there's parcel numbers that we'd have to go in and look at.
One household, one,
Well, because of the weighted vote component, it's not a straight, oh, you got to a number, as Rob showed on the chart. You're gonna have to look at how do you get to that 20% of property.
Of the acreage. So it would take a lot of staff time, so it would not be without some expense, because we'd have to look at each one of those parcels that had a signature on it, understand the acreage and total the acreage of the entirety of the LMD.
Verify ownership.
Verify ownership, all of that.
have we heard from the Lake Management District representatives themselves?
We have two of the representatives of the steering committee here today. They did provide the board previously with an email or report or statement, basically, about how they have been approaching the work of it. In many ways, providing their side of the story. And in part, showing this documentation really was to illustrate that they have been making every effort to involve residents around the lake and who are also contributing as part of the LMD. Because, one of the things that in our change last year from being a highly staffed model to support the LMDs to one that is very volunteer intensive with some administrative support from the county, they are looking for volunteers who share the goals of the LMD in terms of the health and well-being of the lake for the environment as well as recreation. So I know they would welcome additional participation.
Thank you for the info.
Yeah. Rob did
Okay,
a good job.
we're good on that topic. We can move ahead to a business item that we have, which is a proposal to remove the end date for an auditor's position. We discussed this yesterday, it needed to have 24 hours notice. There's a proposed motion, sounded like the board was in favor of taking this action, so if that's true, I would entertain a motion. I don't think we need any further.
I didn't bring the verbiage down with me, but I would make the motion.
So moved.
Okay, I'll second that.
I'll read it and you can say so moved. There would be a motion to approve resolution removing end date of position 02R01550, auditor senior office senior management analyst in the Thurston County Management and Technical Pay Plan.
You couldn't do that from memory? So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion on this motion? Commissioner Mejia, you're unmuted.
Oh, well, it's just a vote.
Okay, very good. Okay, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next up is commissioner items. If anything has arisen you would like to bring up? Okay, that's the end of the agenda. We're adjourned.